Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
We're going to have a great show, and you're going to get a lot of information about how to deal with loss and recovery, particularly in families. We'll be talking about that today. I wanted to remind you that our new book, Open to Love, The Secrets of Senior Dating, written by myself and my fiance, Dr. Frank Powers, is now available on Amazon. It's fun, it's readable, it's easy. We've got lots of tips and tools for you if you're lonely and if you lost a partner and if you're looking for love. So go to Amazon after this show and buy it. All right, Heidi, we got a great guest today. You want to introduce her?
Sure, Mom. And before I do, I just want to say that we will be talking today about supporting families in grief. And Adam Rabinovich, who we had on our show, Mom, he's the executive director for COPE, is the one that told us about Anne-Marie Conlan. And she will be on our show today because she has a wealth of knowledge on how to support families. And she herself is no stranger to grief and loss because when she was in her 20s, she lost both of her parents within a very short time period of each other. So Anne-Marie is the director of the Bereavement Center of Westchester, a nonprofit organization where she oversees the Treehouse program, school outreach, individual and group counseling, and all aspects of the organization. She graduated from Loyola University in Maryland and got her master's in mental health counseling. And I actually went to Loyola University in New Orleans and have the same master's degree. So welcome, Anne-Marie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Well, what an important topic. How did you decide to get into the field?
I got into this organization when I was 24. I became a volunteer for our Treehouse program. So back in 2004, my roommate from college, actually from Loyola, her mother started this program in 1996, the Treehouse program.
Oh.
So I knew about it that way. And, it really just always struck with me, this organization for loss. And I hadn't had anyone significant die yet, but I was drawn to it. So I did the training, I became a volunteer, and I just fell in love with it. And then I went on for my career, I got my clinical license. And then I became the assistant director and then the director. So I've been there for 10 years now. I'm just celebrating my 10-year anniversary.
Now, did you get support yourself when your parents died? Were you involved with Treehouse then?
I was not. I was when my father died, so I actually was working there. Yeah, so I had a wonderful support system around me.
Yeah, right. Nice. Well, talk about families. What's most difficult for a family, do you think, that when they've suffered a loss?
I would say feeling isolated, feeling like you're the only one who's experienced this, especially when it's a young family. I always ask kids to tell me, can you name anyone? Can you identify anyone in your class or your school that has had someone significant in their life die? It's really, they struggle. They struggle to think of someone that they know who's had a parent or a sibling die. And even if they can name one or two kids that they've heard about, they've never really connected with them. It's not something they talk about at school. So I think it's isolating to grieve, and feel like you're the only one. So the Treehouse is a wonderful place where all these young families can go and not feel so alone.
Heidi, I know you said before that you were older when your brother died, but you didn't know anybody who had that.
It's true. I was definitely thinking about that, Mom, as you were speaking, Anne-Marie, because although I was 20 when my 17-year-old brother and cousin died together, they were both teenagers in high school, and I didn't know anybody that had a brother or sister die at my age. So I did feel very alone, and something like your program would have been incredible. And I did eventually end up finding the compassionate friends and finding other siblings, which was really important in my journey, because as you know, hearing that you're not alone and that other kids have been through this or young adults is super important in somebody's journey. Given that you had lost both your parents in your 20s, which is very young to lose your parents, once you had the experience, did you learn anything that you were surprised about? I mean, because it sounds like you were in the field and then you had the death of your parents.
I just was surprised most about how other people treat you and how other
Mhm.
people don't know how to support you.
Mhm.
And so I think that's another reason why programs like the Treehouse are so important and essential is because people in our lives are trying to fix it for us, right? They want to, how many times you hear someone say, I don't know what to say or I don't know what to do, when simply just showing up is just all you can do and all the most important thing you can do. But it's hard for people to sit with sadness. And it's hard for people to
Mhm.
watch pain. So I think that was the most surprising thing for me.
Mhm.
Well, I totally agree with you. And it's interesting that you're saying that because whenever somebody knows someone that's had a loss, they usually contact me immediately and say, what books do you have? What resources do you have? What can I send them? And I'm thinking right now, this early on, they just need you to show up for them and be there to support them in their grief. And that's harder than it looks because people want to fix it. You can't at the end of the day.
I would say with children, it's a mixture of boys and girls pretty evenly because I'd say the parents are driving that decision. Usually,
Mhm.
except for teenagers, but we even teenagers they'll come, and I think one of the reasons why they do come is because they do want to be heard and to feel heard and validated and normalized. Parents want to know that their kids are going to be okay, so that's why they're coming.
Mhm. One of the questions I get often when I go to bereavement conferences and present from the parents, and this will not surprise you, is, our kids, they're not talking to us about the loss. And we're worried that they might not be doing well. What would you say to parents that have those concerns?
I just, in fact, was emailing with a mother this morning who has a 13-year-old boy, and she said he's not talking a lot about the death of her husband, and she's worried. And so, one of the things we say, and we say this a lot, is we grieve in character, right?
Ah,
So we bring ourselves to the experience. So for a 13-year-old boy, was he talking before the loss of his father?
mm,
Does he talk a lot about his feelings in general, right? So then we can't expect someone to change the tools that they have, right? When they now are facing the worst experience of their life, and that's how they cope. So you can just keep the door open for them and let them know that you're there, we're
mm,
hear you, and that's why the peer support is so important, right? Because
Mhm.
they don't want to talk to adults, they don't want to upset their parent, and the parent doesn't want to upset them, right? So everyone's
right.
kind of doing in their own way. So they come to the treehouse and they can do that with their peers.
Mhm.
So it sounds like you run peer support groups for the children, and then then you have parent support groups as well.
Yeah. So when the children in their age designated groups, they're grouped into anywhere from 4 years old to 18 years old. The parents are also in a group at the same time. So whether or not it was a child loss group or a spouse partner loss group.
I wondered, do you see a lot of survival guilt with kids? Feeling like they should have been the one, or, what am I doing here when my sibling died?
Yes, I mean, I think guilt is just an emotion that comes up a lot in any loss that we have and that we hear about, and it could be irrational or it could be rational, right? Um, Especially with kids where they kind of have this magical thinking, they sometimes think that they could have done something or done something more. But definitely with siblings, I know there was years back there was a child who it came out that he was so concerned with how he shared a room with his brother who died from cancer, and how come the cancer jumped over him in the bed
Mm,
and got to his brother, right?
wow.
There was that guilt that he was carrying. Teens don't usually um, think so much in magical thinking, but they can still think that maybe if I was around more, maybe if I didn't get into that fight, maybe they wouldn't have had a heart attack, or maybe they wouldn't have been so stressed, right? So I think at any age there is that magical thinking. Definitely, from 7 to 9, it's very prominent.
What peer support gave me that my parents couldn't is that when I went to my parents and would say, I feel bad that, Scott died, he was the only boy, we all loved him, they would say, Heidi, we would be horrified if anyone died. That's crazy. We love you, etc. But when I went to my peers and said it, they validated and acknowledged that it was a normal feeling. and that a lot of kids feel like that. So I didn't feel like there was something weird about me saying that. And it also wasn't shut down right away, and said, well, that's, we love you and we're glad you're still here. Because then there was nothing, nowhere to go with it. The peers give you more space to be able to really talk about stuff that you don't feel comfortable talking about in other places.
Do you have
Yeah.
some activity that you want to share with us?
Oh, yeah. So we have different themes that we touch upon. And we have a whole curriculum, but some of them that come to mind. I love letter writing. So
Mm.
any, whether it's to the to your loved one or from your loved one to you, from that perspective, that's a great activity. Um, just recently, we did an activity, the empty chair, with an adult who had lost his father when he was 8 years old. And that was amazing to watch. And the empty chair is when you really bring the absent presence into the room, and you introduce that person to the group using different post-its and questions about the person. And they can be any questions, any from what was your favorite food to what was something you wish you could tell me. So really,
So Anne Marie, you're saying you had a group and there was somebody in there that had lost their father at 8, and you did the empty chair with the group there.
yes. So
That's
recently,
really cool.
yeah, recently we had our annual training for our volunteers who run the facilitate the children's groups. And part of the training is really getting in touch with their own grief journey and their own, their blueprint that they carry with them, their stories. So we do these activities to see where kind of our trigger points are, and also to learn how to do the activities. So it was really amazing to watch.
I like your idea about a blueprint. We have blueprints of the way we deal with grief and loss. Talk a little bit more about that. I like that.
So we, like I said before, we each come to our, with experience with who we are, right? And one of the things that affects grief is our losses before, another significant loss, right? And we recently had a woman whose son died about 5 years ago. She's still in our program, and she had another loss, a significant loss, and now the impact of that loss, because of the grief blueprint she has, right, is going to be, that wound is going to be reopened, right? So that really impacts our grief processes, and what we say our grief blueprint.
Try to get support for yourself and your kids in some kind of a group in your community. A lot of communities have these now. You're in the Westchester area, but you can look to your on the internet to try to find communities, maybe get in touch with your local hospice. But also I wanted to hit a little bit on volunteerism, because at some point that outreach, I think, becomes quite healing. How early do you recommend people doing that? Do you have a guideline for that in your program?
It depends on the loss, but we usually say at least a year after you've had a loss. We're always looking for volunteers. That is how we're able to offer this program for free for our families.
And how do people find you?
Our website, www.bcwtreehouse.org. So that's BCW, so Bereavement Center of Westchester, treehouse.org.
Great. Well, if you had one piece of advice for a grieving family right now, what would it be?
It would be to get support,
That
you're not alone.
Oh, I love it. Very nice. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you.
Anne Marie, thank you so much for everything you're doing with families that are grieving to help them find hope after loss.
Thank you. And you too. Thank you. Thank you both.
And thanks everybody for joining us on this show today. And Heidi and I always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe. I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.